Meru Reserve, midday. A lion breaks from the brush and falls near the gravel edge of the Eastern Patrol Road. His right side hits the ground first. There is no sound, just a short shudder through his ribs and the lift of dust around his body. He does not rise. Elias was returning from a midday water check when he saw the movement. Not a run, not a stalk, just a lean body tipping forward, too thin to hold weight. He brakes gently and steps out without calling. The lion's flanks rise and fall, but slower now. Not from sleep, from strain. The wound is not visible at first, only the dry crust across his shoulder and the absence of fullness along his belly. Starvation, possibly an old injury. His tail flicks once, then stillness. There are no vultures in the sky. That means he hasn't been down long, but long enough that his body gave up here. Not in shade, not in cover. Right on the open roadside, in full sun. Elias radios the field clinic. A mobile team is 20 minutes out. Maybe more. He speaks softly, steady, naming the exact location and noting that sedation might not be needed. He's down, he says, but alive. He stays by the vehicle. Any closer, and the lion may waste what little strength remains. There's no telling if the animal can still move. If he runs, he dies. If he stays, he might live, if help arrives fast enough. 10 minutes pass. The lion doesn't move except to breathe. Each rise of the chest is shallower than the last. Flies gather near the eyes. Elias pulls a cloth from his kit and tosses it gently toward the lion's face, landing a few feet short. A test. The lion blinks. Then nothing more. Something has happened in recent days. A fight, a failed hunt, or illness. But this isn't just weakness. It's surrender. The kind that comes when no strength remains even to hide. The sun presses hard overhead. The road dust begins to lift in waves of heat. Elias steps closer, staying low, slow. He doesn't speak, only watches. The lion's breathing continues. One shallow draw every few seconds. When Elias reaches 10 paces, he stops. Still no growl. No lift of the head. Just the sound of breath through a dry throat and the distant buzz of insects. Then, without warning, the lion's front paw twitches. It doesn't rise but shifts just enough to press against the ground. His eye opens half a blink. There is no challenge in the look. Just a question. Confusion, perhaps. Pain. Recognition is not part of it. The lion sees movement, feels heat, and breathes again. From behind, the soft roll of tires approaches. The mobile unit slows as it nears, then stops completely. Doors do not slam. No one rushes. A vet steps down with the sedative ready, but Elias raises one hand. "Not yet," he says quietly. He's not moving. The lion closes his eyes again, breath stalling, then resuming. Time is short. Every moment risks collapse beyond revival. But still they wait. Then, from the brush behind them, a branch cracks. Not loud, not threatening, just a shift. Something else is watching, something unseen. Elias doesn't turn fully. He only glances toward the sound. A shadow moves in the tree line, then stops. No one speaks. Beside the road, the lion lies still, but no longer alone. His chest rises once more, slower now, but steady. The wait continues. Elias moved carefully, one step at a time. The lion's ears twitched at the sound of the boot pressing against gravel, but his body did not lift. From a distance of 5 paces, the animal finally stirred. A shallow groan, barely audible, left his throat as his head raised slightly from the dust. Then he exhaled, slow and long, and lowered it again. It was not the sound of fear or defense. It was the sound of something still alive, but done resisting. Elias paused. He looked at the lion's ribs. The breaths were weak, uneven, spaced too far apart. The wound was more visible now, a deep matting of fur behind the right shoulder, dried and clumped. It had not bled in hours. The skin around it was crusted and beginning to sag. No infection yet. But soon. The smell was faint but rising. He knelt, not beside the lion, still too close for that, but close enough to unclip the small canvas satchel from his belt. Inside it were only basic supplies: gauze, a small saline bottle, antiseptic gel, water, and cloth. Not enough to heal, but enough to try. "If we wait," he said quietly, "we might lose him." No one responded. The rest of the team was still preparing the tranquilizer and stretch frame in the vehicle behind. They were watching, but none stepped forward. Elias wasn't asking them to. He unscrewed the water cap and poured a small stream into the shallow basin of the metal lid. Then he placed it gently on the ground, sliding it forward just within reach. The lion watched it, not with hunger, not with urgency, but with a slow blink that told Elias the creature still saw, still measured. The nose twitched once, a single breath through the nostrils, then nothing. He reached for the saline and cloth. No needles yet, no force, just a rinse. The lion's chest rose and fell, then again, still alive, still deciding. As he moved the cloth toward the injured flank, Elias kept his voice low. Not soothing, just steady. "I'm not here to take anything," he murmured, "just to stop the bleeding." When the damp cloth touched the edge of the wound, the lion flinched once, not a full recoil. Just a tightening of the back leg and a short puff of air through the nose. Elias held his hand still, then waited. Seconds passed. The lion didn't move again. The wound was deeper than it had first seemed. Not torn, not clawed. More likely from metal. A failed snare or jagged wire. The edges were clean but wide. There were flies, but no larvae. That meant the injury was recent. A day, maybe 2. Long enough to weaken him. Not long enough to destroy the muscle. If they waited for sedation and full procedure, his blood pressure might drop too far. But if Elias moved too fast, the lion might bolt. And that would be the end. If he runs, he dies. If he stays, there's still a chance. He cleaned the wound in slow circles. No words now. Just a quiet breath. The lion's eyes stayed half closed. His body trembled once, then eased again. The soft brush of wind lifted dust around them both, settling into the folds of the lion's fur. Behind them, the second lion still hadn't moved from the trees. Watching. Waiting. Another breath passed. Then another. The lion did not run. Elias leaned in again, this time with gauze folded twice over his fingers and soaked gently with saline. The lion's ribs moved. One slow rise, one fragile fall. But his eyes remained open now, unblinking, still. He did not bare his teeth. He did not growl. The body was too far gone for that. Whatever wild strength remained had slipped beneath the skin. With deliberate hands, Elias began to wipe the wound. He didn't press, he didn't peel, just slow circles near the edge of dried blood, lifting dirt and dust from the matted fur. The lion flinched once, a tremor through the leg. Elias stopped, waited, then continued. Each time the cloth moved, it left a trail of clean fur beneath the dried edge. The smell was stronger now, sour with heat and rot, but not yet fatal. No pus, no full infection, but time was short. A soft wind passed down the trees above, rustling dry branches. The brush behind them remained quiet. The second lion had not moved since appearing at the edge of the tree line. He had not stepped forward, not turned away, just stood there, body taut, eyes trained on the one receiving care. Elias didn't look back again. All his attention stayed on the wounded one. The gauze soaked quickly, and he folded a new edge before returning to the wound. The lion let out a small breath through his nostrils. Not a snort, just a release. And then his head shifted. Not up, not away. He turned slightly toward Elias's hand. just enough that the cloth brushed closer to his shoulder. It wasn't trust. That wasn't how these moments worked. It was something smaller. Stillness, tolerance, the choice not to resist, not to flee. That alone was a kind of permission. Elias didn't speak. He soaked the cloth again, then traced a clean line around the base of the wound where the flies clustered. One by one, they scattered. The skin underneath was raw but intact. Beneath the lion's ribs, breath still moved. Shallow, yes, but rhythmic now. A pattern. Life. From the vehicle, the vet stepped forward with a sedative. Elias shook his head once. "Not yet," he said softly. "Let me finish." They understood. No one rushed. The lion's condition remained stable, barely. But every movement, every cloth pass, was doing what no needle could do right now. It was keeping the animal calm. Then, from deep in the trees, a sound broke the silence. Not loud, not threatening, just a single low moan, long and distant. Elias looked up. So did the lion. For the first time, his ears angled forward, his eyes opened fully. The second lion, still standing at the edge of the brush, lifted his head and responded. One low huff, barely voiced. A greeting, a question, or something else. Elias paused. He saw the wounded lion's nostrils flare slightly, searching. Then a faint twitch passed through his paw. His back leg moved once, weakly. Not to stand, only to shift toward the sound. The bond between the two lions was not yet clear. Brothers, maybe. Former coalition mates, or something simpler. Recognition in a shared scent. Elias finished one last wipe, then sat back slowly. The lion's head remained lifted. His gaze moved toward the brush now. That small moment. The soft breath, the steady contact, the tolerance, had passed. A new presence had entered the space, and everything had changed. The sound came again, that low, pulsing moan that didn't rise in pitch, didn't threaten, just moved through the stillness like a signal. The brush parted gently, and from its shadow stepped the second lion. He was smaller, lean through the chest, and moved with a distinct hesitation. His front leg bore more weight than the back. Every few steps his hind paw dragged lightly, leaving a mark in the dust. The limp wasn't new. It was practiced, an old injury, healed badly. Still, there was no struggle in his gait, just calculation. He walked with purpose. Elias didn't move, neither did the vet. The air thickened as silence wrapped around the scene. The first lion, the wounded one, lifted his head higher now. A small shift. His eyes followed the approach, not with fear, not with concern, but something slower. Familiarity. He blinked once, then held still. The second lion did not stop at the edge of the clearing. He didn't lower his head, didn't show submission, but he didn't posture either. His tail stayed low, his ears forward. As he stepped closer, he paused once, 5 meters out, and stood in full view. Elias saw his ribs, not sharp like the fallen lion's, but present. He had not eaten well, not recently, yet this one still stood. He took another step, then another. Each movement is deliberate. The vet reached for the tranquilizer again, but Elias raised his hand. "Let him come," he whispered. The smaller lion circled slowly to the right. He didn't look at the humans, only the one on the ground. When he reached the injured lion's shoulder, he stopped, lowered his head, sniffed once, close but not touching. Then, with one soft exhale, he turned and lowered himself onto the dirt. There was no fanfare, no dramatic moments, just the weight of a living body settling beside a dying one. The injured lion blinked again. His breath came more slowly now, but steady. He didn't flinch at the closeness, didn't pull away. Their sides didn't touch. But the space between them closed until there were only a few inches. 2 bodies, one lying broken, one choosing to stay. Elias exhaled quietly, unaware he'd been holding breath. The presence of the second lion changed the entire balance. The moment no longer felt medical. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't survival. It was a presence. Something had drawn this second lion here, not the scent of blood, not the smell of death, but something older. Perhaps memory. Perhaps loyalty. In the wild, coalitions form early. Young males born into the same pride often grow up inseparable. They fight together, feed together, leave together when the time comes. Some remain bonded until one falls. Others separate but return when the scent of weakness carries across the plains. This was not a rivalry. This was not a coincidence. This was returned. The smaller lion rested his head across his front paws. His ears stayed tuned, his eyes half closed, but he didn't sleep. He just stayed, still, watching. Behind them, the sun began to lower slightly, stretching shadows along the dust. The first lion did not move again, but he didn't need to. Now, he wasn't alone. The vet moved carefully, each step measured against the silence. In his hand, the loaded syringe glinted once in the afternoon light, dull and harmless in its purpose. The lion on the ground was still. His breaths came fewer now, slow draws that shivered through a ribcage pulled tight against failing muscle. His mouth hung slightly open, dry at the edges, a single fly landing near the corner. He did not move to shake it off. The second lion stood only meters away, near the low slope where the tree line met the edge of the clearing. He had not left. Not when the humans gathered, not when the stretcher was unloaded, and not now. As the vet crouched beside the sleeping body of another lion. His body held still, only the wind moving the coarse hair along his back. One leg stayed bent, the bad one, but his posture was alert, not in readiness to attack, but in a quiet readiness to bear witness. Elias remained between the two lions, hands down at his sides, offering no signal, only presence. The team around him was calm, their movements practiced, low to the ground. There was no chatter, no wasted motion. Just soft breath and cloth against fur. The needle entered the lion's rear flank gently, pushing the sedative in with a steady hand. It was not meant to knock him unconscious, only to ease him down. Enough to lift him without pain, to move him without forcing another collapse. The lion's eyes flickered once. His head stirred slightly, then stilled again. One long breath moved through his chest. The muscles, taut and worn, began to soften. It took nearly a minute before the weight in his limbs gave way completely and he relaxed into the dust. Then the second lion moved, only 2 steps, but deliberate. He came forward, slow, pausing just short of the limp frame on the ground. His nose lowered. He did not make contact. He didn't need to. The scent was already familiar. Elias turned slightly toward the vet. "Let him see," he said under his breath. "Let him understand." No one answered, but no one moved either. The second lion circled halfway around the sedated body. Not fast, not curious. It wasn't an investigation. It was an acknowledgement. A quiet calculation of what had changed and what hadn't. When he reached the other side, near the lion's face, he stopped. His ears twitched once, adjusting to a shift in wind. Then he bent his head low and let out a single, quiet exhale. It was not a call, not a cry, just air leaving his lungs, warm and brief, stirring the fur along the sleeping lion's cheek. Then he stepped back, sat down, watched. The stretcher team approached. The canvas, slung between 2 bars, made no noise as it was laid beside the lion's frame. The rangers lifted him slowly. One man supported the head, another the haunches. He weighed less than he should, far less, and as they shifted him, the skin along his back stretched with the motion, revealing the bones underneath. The second lion did not flinch. He did not challenge. He did not retreat. When the lion was lifted into the vehicle bed, wrapped lightly in cloth to cover his exposed side, Elias glanced once more toward the tree line. The second lion remained seated, tail flat, breath slow. His gaze didn't follow the humans. It followed the lion. Only the lion. Elias stood beside the open truck door for a moment longer, then closed it gently. No slam, no command, just the soft click of metal meeting metal. The engine rumbled low. As the vehicle began to reverse, the lion stood again. Not to follow, only to face the motion. The truck rolled past the ridge, past the last dry bush, and onto the hard trail that led back toward the clinic. In the rear mirror, Elias watched the second lion shrink into the landscape. Still facing forward, still watching, a sentinel left behind. "He knows him," Elias said quietly. The vet, sitting beside him, gave a slow nod. "That's no rival." It wasn't a question anymore. Whatever had passed between those two lions had not been new. It had not been instinct. It was a memory. It was something shared long before today, something that remained even as strength failed, even as skin tore, even as silence fell. And now, as they left one lion sedated and the other standing behind, that bond lingered in the dust like a trail no wind could erase. At the edge of the small veterinary station outside Miru Reserve, the makeshift recovery pen stood quiet beneath a line of weathered acacia trees. The fencing wasn't tall, just high enough to mark safety, to offer space where the injured could heal without pressure to run. Inside, the lion lay beneath a thatched shade structure, a thick cotton bandage dressing the wound near his shoulder. He moved little during the day. The sedative had worn off, but exhaustion lingered like a second weight in his body. His eyes opened now and then, mostly in the early morning, tracking light across the fence. The vet checked him twice each day. The saline drip was slow. Fluids moved into the body without resistance. His pulse had steadied, but feeding was still a concern. Meat was placed near him, lightly dusted with crushed medication, yet most of it remained untouched. That was the risk. If his hunger didn't return soon, recovery would stall. On the third evening, just after the sun slipped behind the hills, Elias stood near the outer gate and watched the horizon. The first shadow appeared not long after. A slow, limping form emerged from the line of distant scrub. The second lion. His shape was unmistakable. The smaller frame, the careful placement of each step. He didn't approach the pen directly. He never did. He moved in a wide arc, staying just outside the fence line, circling once before settling on the earth about 20 paces away. He lay facing the enclosure. That was all. The next morning, prints were found where he had slept, deep, unmoving marks pressed into the dirt. He hadn't left until sunrise. This continued. Each evening, he arrived. Each dawn, he was gone. The vet team debated capturing him for examination. The limp was real. He bore old wounds. But Elias spoke first. "He came here on his own," he said. "He's not looking for food or shelter. He's watching the other one. That's enough." No one disagreed. Inside the pen, the injured lion began shifting more often. He stood once, unsteady, then lay back down. His eyes stayed alert longer. The wound showed no signs of infection, and though he still refused most food, he accepted water from the shallow tin basin placed near the fence's edge. One morning, he nudged the meat once, not to eat it, but to move it closer to the sun. No one knew why, but it was a movement. It was a choice. From his resting place beyond the enclosure, the second lion remained a constant figure. He never growled, never called out. And when humans passed near him, he moved away only enough to keep space, never too far, never near. At night his eyes reflected faintly under the moon. At daybreak they disappeared. On the seventh day, the first lion stood fully, not just to shift, but to rise. He walked 3 steps to the edge of the pen and sat facing the scrubland. His body still sagged at the ribs, but his head held upright. Elias, watching from the outer post, glanced toward the distant trees. There, half shielded by brush, the second lion sat as well. Facing him, silent. Whatever had bound them before, blood, memory, old companionship, it hadn't frayed with time or distance. One lion hurt, the other waited. No fence had broken that. And as the wind moved low through the dry grass between them, no movement was made. No call was given, but both remained. 10 days had passed since the lion was carried into the pen. The wound on his shoulder had closed into a thick, pale ridge of healing skin. His ribs still pressed sharp beneath the fur. But the weight was beginning to return, slow and uneven. Every morning he moved a little farther, 2 steps, then 5. By the 9th day, he circled the inner wall once before lowering himself near the eastern fence where the ground held more shade. The second lion never broke his pattern. Each dusk he returned. Each night he stayed just beyond the enclosure. His prints carved a soft semicircle around the outer fence, never crossing it, never testing it. He sat with his bad leg tucked close, facing inward. His eyes didn't wander. That morning, the sun was already high when Elias arrived. The pen was quiet. Flies hummed low in the distance. Inside, the lion was already on his feet. It was the first time he hadn't needed help. No coaxing, no slow press against the earth. He stood without shaking, back legs steady, the front shoulders stiff but locked in place. His head was lifted, his eyes open and alert. Elias stayed behind the wire. No sound passed between them, only breath. Across the clearing, in the exact spot he had chosen every day since, the second lion stirred. He didn't rush, he didn't rise with alarm. He simply lifted his body, slow and even, and mirrored the position. The limp was still there, one leg slow to follow, but he stood fully, tail flicking once through the brush. Both lions faced the same direction. Neither stepped forward. Neither sat back down. Inside the pen, the wounded lion began to walk. Each footfall was careful. He moved the full length of the enclosure from the southern end to the north, where the acacia tree leaned over the corner post. The movement wasn't fast, but it was sure. His body held. His spine curved with balance. Outside the pen, the second lion matched him, pace for pace. Not close enough to touch, not exactly aligned, but mirrored, in rhythm, in path, in presence. Together they made one long pass along the boundary, then another. Elias watched without speaking. The vet stepped beside him, holding the morning logbook in one hand. "He's ready soon," she said quietly. Elias didn't answer at first. He just kept his eyes on the 2 lions. They paused at the far end near the gate that opened into the recovery corridor. The lion inside the fence turned his head, looking past the mesh as if checking something. The one outside had already sat down again, head high. There were no calls, no signs, no performance. But it was clear something had returned, the frame of a bond that hadn't frayed under pain or absence. A rhythm between 2 animals who had lived together before this, who remembered. Inside the pen, the lion lowered himself gently, folding his body with care. The movement no longer hurt him. Outside the fence, the second lion lay down too, his paw pressing into a shallow groove worn from nights of waiting. The distance between them remained. But so did the shape of their connection. Quiet, deliberate, and alive. Tomorrow, perhaps, they will walk farther. But today, they had stood. Together, and that was enough. At dawn, the light was soft and flat across the valley. A low wind moved through the grass just beyond the holding pens, bending the stalks without sound. The final checks had been made. The wound had sealed. Weight had returned to the lion's frame. His breath, once shallow and failing, now came steady and deep. The gate stood open. They had chosen a nearby protected area. Quiet, lightly monitored, not far from the ridge where the second lion had first emerged. It was enough space to move, enough shade to rest. No collars, no dart guns, just open land and time. The lion stood at the threshold before the sun cleared the tree line. His body was still lean, but the strength had returned to his legs. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. He stepped through the gate slowly, as if he already knew the way. The second lion was waiting near the trail, not pressed close, but near enough. He rose when the first approached, his head lifting from his paws in a smooth, practiced motion. He did not advance. He only stood. The air between them held no sound, no roar, no challenge. They didn't touch. But when the first lion passed beside him, the second turned and followed. Elias remained by the gate, arms resting loosely by his sides. No radio call, no farewell, just watching. The two lions walked side by side, a few paces apart, into the grassland that edged the park. Each step was deliberate, balanced, one favoring a healed shoulder, the other carrying the old rhythm of a limp. Their prints marked the dust for only a moment. The wind, light as breath, moved through behind them. In places, the grass rose to hide the trail, but not before Elias saw what mattered. Two clear sets of tracks heading forward. There had been no promises in this rescue. No guarantee of survival once released. The wild would offer them what it had always offered: hunger, space, chance. But the fence was no longer between them. The waiting was over. What remained was motion. As the lions disappeared into the tall grass, Elias stepped forward once until his boots met the first soft impression in the dirt. A paw print, deep and full, beside another, lighter but sure. He did not speak. Above him, a bird called once from the high branches, then quiet again. The sun broke across the horizon, fully now, sending long shadows stretching over the grass. The dust settled behind the prints. The wind softened, and where two lions had stood, one broken, one waiting, now there was only silence. Only the place where they had passed.